I used to think urban legends were just stories people told to scare each other. Things like bathroom ghosts, cursed mirrors, or the woman who crawls on her elbows across train tracks. But after what I saw that night, I stopped calling them stories. Now I call them memories, someone else's nightmare that I accidentally walked into. I worked the night shift at a small rural station near Mororan. It was an old platform from the post-war era, half renovated, still carrying the smell of rust and sea salt. Locals said a girl died there decades ago, cut in half by a train. I never paid much attention. Until that foggy night in early winter, when the station clock struck 1:20 a.m., and something started moving in the dark. The first thing I noticed was the sound, a dry, scraping rhythm echoing between the tracks. I froze, thinking maybe it was loose metal or a stray animal, but the sound had a pulse, steady, deliberate. I followed it to the edge of the platform, shining my flashlight across the fog. For a moment I saw nothing. Then something pale flashed just beyond the signal post. When I stepped closer, the light caught her. A woman, or at least half of one. Her arms pulled her body forward in jerky, impossible movements, elbows striking the concrete with sharp cracks. She dragged herself faster than I could blink, her long hair sweeping the ground behind her like a dark veil. Her face was blank but furious, her mouth moving as if whispering words I couldn't hear. I stumbled back, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The stories I'd laughed at suddenly came flooding back. They said if you hear that sound, Teke Teke, you're already being hunted. They said she lost her legs under a passing train after someone pushed her as a cruel joke. Some say she jumped. Others claim she was trying to escape. But every version ends the same way. Her upper body keeps moving, searching for her missing legs. I ran toward the station office, my boots splashing through puddles. Behind me, the scraping grew louder, faster. It wasn't just sound. It was vibration crawling through the ground into my bones. I slammed the door and locked it, gasping for breath. The radio crackled with static, then a faint voice bled through.
Where are my legs?
The air turned heavy. I saw her reflection in the office window, upside down, hair covering her face, red light glowing behind her. For a second, it looked like she was right there with me, inside the glass. I blinked and she was gone, but the sound didn't stop. It circled the building, closer each second. The floor trembled. My flashlight flickered out. I remember grabbing the emergency flare from the shelf. I struck it against the wall, the spark lighting up the room in harsh red. And that's when I saw her again, right outside the glass, dragging herself across the platform, her hands leaving streaks behind. The red light made her look whole for a second, as if her missing half was made of smoke. Then she looked straight at me. Her mouth opened wider than humanly possible, and I heard the sound again, echoing inside my head. Don't remember much after that. They said they found me unconscious at dawn, the door still locked from the inside. The surveillance footage stopped recording at exactly 1:33 a.m. The last frame showed the platform empty except for a faint smear of red near the tracks glowing in the fog. The police said it was a lens reflection, but I saw the shape. It wasn't light, it was her. Weeks later, when I was packing to move away, one of my co-workers handed me an old incident report from the 1950s. It described a young woman who fell onto the tracks after being teased by classmates who put a cicada on her shoulder. The train hit her instantly. Her name was Kashima Reiko. That's when I realized something chilling. Teke Teke wasn't just a rumor. She might have been Reiko, still searching, still asking the same question to anyone unlucky enough to hear her. It's been 3 weeks since that night. Sometimes when the night train passes by my apartment, I still hear it faintly under the wheels. I keep telling myself it's just the sound of metal on metal. But every time I check the clock, it's always 1:20 a.m. And lately I've started to dream of red light flooding through the window and a voice whispering soft and close, "You heard my story. That means I'm coming." I haven't slept well since. I've stopped wearing red, stopped going near stations, but I can still hear her when the night goes quiet. The sound crawls closer, steady and patient, until it's right behind me. People think curses need candles and circles of salt. Mine started with a click. I was cleaning an old external drive, the kind with a spinning disc that purrs when it wakes. It belonged to my cousin who moved overseas. He asked me to sort his files and keep anything worth saving. Most of it was junk, broken installers, photos named with numbers, a folder called Old Web. Inside that, a subfolder labeled GeoCities. I hadn't seen that name in years. Curiosity 1. I double-clicked a HTML file and my browser opened to a page that looked like it had been mummified since 1999. Pixelated stars on a black background. A counter at the bottom stuck at low 666. In the center, a tiny flash player icon. I hovered the mouse and told myself it wouldn't load. But the drive whirred, and the window dimmed, and something small and red appeared. Just a rectangle, the size of a Post-it note, floating at the edge of my screen. No border, no title. A single line of text in Japanese cut off at the end. Anataha, how kideska? I don't read much Japanese, but I recognize the structure from an app I used. Do you like? I went to close it. The little X wasn't there. When I clicked the corner, the box moved as if dodging me. Then another identical red box blinked on. The first one skittered to the side like a startled insect. I pressed ESC. Nothing. Alt plus F4. Nothing. It felt like playing whack-a-mole with my own computer. The speakers clicked, and a voice came through the static, high and flat, like a child reading in class. Do you like? The rest fell into a whisper I couldn't catch. I checked the system volume and it was muted, but the voice kept going, pausing between words as if it needed to breathe. Do you like? Do you like? I shut the browser. The desktop showed for a second and then turned dark red. Not a normal red, a dry, faded shade, like paint left out in the sun. The pop-up returned, only larger, the sentence a little more complete this time. Anata ha chi I hukideska? I recognized one word. Chi, red. I pulled the plug from the laptop. The screen stayed on. The drive kept spinning. The voice repeated, "Do you like the..." It was almost polite, the question broken across each syllable like it was learning to speak. I remember the articles years ago about a rumor from Japan, the Red Room something. A clip that asked you a question and then you showed up on a list no one wanted to join. Reporters had linked it to a real case, which made people argue whether a video could make anyone do anything. I always thought the idea was tasteless, like daring the dark to answer. I told myself my brain was reaching for a label because labels are more comforting than admitting you don't know what ass happening to your screen. The red brightened. My cursor froze. Lines of text scrolled up, names in languages I recognized and some I didn't. They were centered like credits at the end of a film, only there was no music, just that voice, calm and even. Do you like the Red Room? Each time it finished, the question started again. Same rhythm and tone, like a lullaby that didn't care whether you slept or not. My name wasn't there. For a moment, I felt ridiculous relief. Then the list stuttered and jumped, the final slot empty. The pop-up shifted and bumped the edge of the screen as if it were looking for a way out. I realized it wasn't a window at all. It was space made in the red, a cutout through which something was watching the rest of my desktop drown. I closed the laptop. The voice kept going, muffled now. I wrapped the machine in a blanket and put it in the closet. The apartment's quiet returned in patches like sound after a power outage. I held my breath, waiting for the inevitable knock, but there wasn't one. Just the soft roll of traffic outside and the far-off whistle of a train. That night I dreamed in colors, but none of them were red. In the morning I called my cousin and asked about the drive. He laughed and said it was probably loaded with weird stuff from the forums he used to visit. That era when people hunted for clips, too cursed to stay up. He said it like a joke. I told him not to watch anything from it. He asked why. I didn't have a good answer that didn't sound superstitious. I left the laptop in the closet. I used my phone for work and moved on. A few days later, I woke at 3:12 a.m. to a soft chime. Not my alarm, not a message. My phone screen was red from corner to corner, not glowing so much as absorbing. In the center, the same sentence, this time nearly complete. Anata hachi ibuyu ga suki desu ka? The little dots of my wallpaper showed through like the color had stained the pixels. I locked the phone. The question followed me to the black screen, slightly dimmer, as if it were etched beneath the glass. I put the phone face down and told myself not to touch it. I went to the kitchen and turned on the sink just to make noise. The sound of water made a hollow in the silence. When I came back, the screen was off. I convinced myself I had dozed on my feet and that my memory was exaggerating. The mind will do a lot to help you look away. On the 7th day, I noticed my name in strange places. In the autocomplete of the search bar when I hadn't typed anything yet. On a shopping site I had never used. At the bottom of the Notes app I never shared. The font was always slightly different, like it came from a system I hadn't installed. I started taping paper over the little lights in my apartment, the router, the smoke detector, because their tiny red glow made my skin prickle. I switched the settings on every device to warmer tones. I avoided the color in clothes. When I passed a storefront with a neon sign, I crossed the street. The voice didn't return. That should have comforted me. Instead, it made the quiet feel packed with insomnia. I kept expecting it, the same way you listen for a drip in the middle of the night and start hearing it in your own heartbeat. That's when the question changed. I heard it inside my head, not through speakers or glass, but from somewhere you can't mute. Do you like it? Different words, same pattern. A pause before the last syllable, as if it were waiting for an honest answer. I pulled the laptop from the closet and opened it just to make it stop. The screen flickered, showed the desktop, then went red, calmly, like a curtain being drawn. The list of names returned, slow and steady, and I finally understood what had bothered me the first time. The order wasn't chronological or alphabetical. It felt like the sequence you get when someone scrolls with a fingertip, back and forth, back and forth. When the last space came up empty again, the cursor moved by itself and tapped the blank line twice, as if it were testing whether the field could hold a word. I said my name out loud without meaning to. It felt like answering attendance. The microphone light blinked on, then off. My name appeared in the blank space, letter by letter, perfectly spelled. The list dimmed. The voice exhaled, a soft sound like the end of a recording, and asked me one more time, gentle as ever, "Do you like the red room?" The laptop went dark. No error, no icons, just the reflection of my own face floating in a screen that was now a window with nothing behind it. I waited. Nothing happened. I closed it and left it on the table. I didn't sleep that night, expecting the color to bleed under the door or seep through the wall paint. Morning came anyway. Everything looked normal. I made coffee and told myself I had been played by an ancient file and an overactive imagination. I laughed once to prove I could. The sound didn't fill the room. It barely left my mouth. When I sat down to write this, I opened a blank document and stared at the ashen white of the page until it warmed at the edges, slow and almost delicate. I blinked hard, and it was plain again. I'm telling myself that screens do that sometimes, that they hold on to after images the way we hold on to things we wish we'd never seen. I need to finish quickly. If you're reading this, I don't think the question is for me anymore. It's for whoever knows enough to imagine the window. It doesn't need a link or a player. It just needs a listener and a little silence. When the room feels too quiet, you might hear it. Polite, practiced, patient. Do you like the red room? You don't have to answer, but it will wait for one. I had heard of the legend of Oiwa long before I ever visited Yotsuya. People said that her name should never be spoken lightly, that she still listened for it in the quiet of the night. But curiosity is stronger than caution. I came to Tokyo to help film a short documentary about haunted places, and our final location was the small shrine dedicated to her, the Oiwa Inari Tamiya Shrine. The neighborhood was silent when we arrived. Even the cicadas seemed to hold their breath. I carried the camera, feeling the weight of every footstep on the narrow stone path. The shrine itself was modest, tucked between apartment buildings, a red gate half hidden by vines. A caretaker bowed as we entered and told us softly that every crew who filmed here offered incense first. "She remembers disrespect," he said. We laughed politely, left a coin, and began setting up. Inside the lens, the world looked too still. The wooden walls shimmered faintly with age, and the faint smell of smoke hung in the air. We filmed the altar, the offerings, the candles burning low. I wanted a closer shot of the mirror that stood behind the statue of Oiwa. Its surface was cloudy, old. I focused, adjusted the light, and for a split second the image bent. The reflection didn't match the frame. It seemed to breathe. I stepped back, telling myself it was just the camera's autofocus. That night, as I reviewed the footage in the hotel, the sound cut for 2 seconds. In that silence, a whisper slipped through the headphones, my name, spoken with a breath that didn't belong to anyone in the room. When the sound returned, the image on the monitor froze on the shrine mirror. My reflection inside it was smiling, though I wasn't. I shut the laptop and stared at my own reflection in the window. The city lights outside stretched into thin red lines like veins. I told myself I was tired, but sleep came in fragments, each one broken by the same dream. Someone brushing my hair, a voice murmuring, "Does this hurt?" I would wake with the scent of incense clinging to the sheets. The next day, the producer called to say one of the crew had fallen down a stairwell. Nothing fatal, but strange. He'd been holding a prop mirror when it happened, and it shattered before he hit the ground. I thought of the caretaker's words. We went back to the shrine with flowers and incense. I stayed at the edge while the others prayed, holding the camera against my chest like a shield. The caretaker looked at me and asked if I had seen her yet. I didn't answer. He nodded slowly, as if that silence told him everything. "She doesn't show herself to harm," he said, "only to remind." That night I watched the footage again. Every frame of that mirror showed something different. Sometimes the room behind us, sometimes the same room empty, sometimes a figure standing a few steps away. A woman's shape, her head bowed, her hair falling forward as if hiding her face. When I paused the video, the reflection stayed still even after the rest of the image froze. It turned slightly toward me, and I heard the sound again, a faint, drawn breath. I unplugged the laptop and went to the sink. The tap water ran cold enough to sting. In the reflection of the metal faucet, my own eye looked slightly off-center. I blinked until it returned to normal. Fear makes the mind invent things, I told myself. But there are moments when imagination feels like permission. Weeks passed. The documentary aired without the shrine sequence. The files had corrupted. Viewers said the ending felt unfinished. I was grateful. I didn't want to see that mirror again. Sometimes, late at night when the apartment is too quiet, I hear the soft rasp of fabric sliding over a floorboard, like someone kneeling behind me. If I glance at the dark of the window, there's a shimmer of another face beside mine, faint and almost kind. I never look long enough to see the difference clearly. They say Oiwa's curse isn't vengeance, it's remembrance. She shows herself to those who forget what betrayal costs. Maybe that's why she follows people who try to capture her story, to remind us that pain once witnessed belongs to both the victim and the storyteller. I still keep the camera, but I never film mirrors anymore. In every reflection, I wait for the tilt of a head, the quiet breath, the ghost of someone asking whether I've learned to see her as more than a legend. When the air turns cold around my shoulders, I whisper an apology into the glass. I hope she hears it.